I'm sitting down here with Caleb Stevens, who has actually authored two books that have been published in 2023. One is The Girls in the Cabin, and the other is Feeders, which I have read and reviewed and am very excited to talk about. Caleb, how you doing?
Really, thanks for having me today, Joey. I really appreciate it.
For sure, for sure. Really enjoyed Feeders, and I've seen on social media a lot of people are enjoying it as well. I think it's a really fun little monster mashup that has a lot of heart. So, and it turns out you had a lot of early trouble getting it published, which I'm interested to hear about, as you note in your acknowledgments. So, first thing I wanted to talk about though is just give a synopsis of each of those books.
Yeah, so Feeders, I guess you'd call it the apocalyptic road trip from hell, with family members you don't like. So that'd be the synopsis for that one. And then Girls in the Cabin is really about a dad who's taking his daughters on a backpacking trip to reconnect with them after the death of his wife and their mother, and sort of the terrible things that happen from that point. Ultimately, circling around to hopefully a happier ending, but that's the synopsis for that one.
Okay, so it seems like we have two very different books, but they
Yes.
both have something to do with sort of a toxic family relationship at the center, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, why are we sticking with that theme? What compels you about that?
That's a good question actually, because I grew up in a really great household with loving parents and have
Oh,
good
how about
relationships
that?
with my sisters and everything. But I do think that the best stories revolve around complex relationships, and especially around family and the dynamics there. So there's just a lot to mine, a lot to explore with family. And um I'm a dad, and so I think I feel the bond between a father and daughters very strongly. That's something I can relate to and write from experience as well. So that's, I believe, pretty much why I chose those relationships to focus on.
And without giving too much away about feeders, it does involve a father-daughter relationship that actually takes a turn that you don't expect in a kind of a lovely way. There's a lot of misconceptions about the relationship that you write about, and it seems like you being a father, you're well equipped to handle all that, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So. We'll talk about feeders a little bit more, but wanted to ask you about your publishing journey with both of these books. Uh, both have come out in 2023, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, long time ago, at least it feels like to me now, probably more in my early 30s, late 20s, I started really focusing in on writing and found it was a passion, a huge passion, something I really want to do. And wrote a failed novel and spent about 5 years doing that one in between the birth of my twin daughters. And I have three girls, but had the twins at that time. And so it was really hard to write, and um, pulled it out about 5 years in, finally got it done and realized it just didn't work. And I think most or a lot of authors go through that first sort of walk across the coals experience when they write. Um, Took a step back and spent some time writing short stories, and found I really loved short stories, and they were a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about the craft. And for writers out there who are just starting, I really suggest spending some time in short stories, because it sort of accelerates your craft and helps you understand different genres, and it connects you and bonds you with a lot of different authors, and you can get involved with different communities and get beta feedback really quickly that way. And so um spent longer in short stories than I thought I would, but went about publishing several of those. And had one, I know you mentioned not on this podcast, but earlier when we were talking about how you're involved in film, and had the pleasure of a director reaching out from Hollywood, who was interested in a short story I wrote called The Wallpaper Man. And he heard it on a podcast. And so, we went on from there to make a short film, which was beyond my wildest dreams. And that was in 2022. And we're working on a full feature now. And meanwhile, over the next, I'd say, call it, gosh, I was probably 35 or 36, and I'm 44 now, so time flies. But, was able to finish two more novels and landed an agent, and really appreciated her belief in me. And she took Feeders out, and she took The Girls in the Cabin out to, the traditional publishers and the traditional path. And unfortunately, and this is not something I expected, just due to my how do I say it? Naivety. Sorry.
Perfect. We all
Words
know what you're
there.
trying to say because we have it
Naive,
too.
naive. I thought I'd made it the second I landed an agent, and again, I think a lot of authors experience this and don't quite realize that it's just as difficult for an agent to sell your book as it is for you to write a book and then to actually go land an agent in the first place. So, a lot
It
of
opens more
stars
doors, I like to say. It opens doors. It just doesn't mean that they won't be closed.
100%, 100%. Yep, and a lot of stars have to align to get your book into the doors of a traditional publisher. So, ultimately, though, it didn't work with her. Um, that was a real gut punch. And I thought, you know what? At this point, I had no expectations, and I thought, hey, why don't I submit these two novels to some publishers? And lo and behold, within 2 months, I had two book deals. It was wild. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. And you mentioned you were very forthcoming in your acknowledgments about having some trouble getting feeders originally out to some publishers, and them passing on it, and you going back and rewriting it a little bit. Maybe could you talk a little bit about the perseverance you had to go through in order to get it out? Because I mean, it's out there. A lot of people are enjoying it. So I mean, in my mind, it's kind of like their loss. But obviously, at the
I
time,
appreciate that.
yeah, it probably felt like, oh, like, am I actually doing the right thing here? Should I just give this up?
Yeah. So, with feeders in particular, um, I mentioned about how I wrote that failed book. Well, one of the things I did is I went and I read every craft book I could get my hands on. Funny enough, my wife's uncle uh, is a screenwriter, and he wrote the original screenplay for Jumanji, um, which I ran the first book by him, and he directed me to some craft books, which I read, and it just really helped me understand how you actually do want to hit tropes. You do there are certain ways to write a book. There's certain things that you want to play with certain conventions depending upon the genre. And so with feeders, it was my 2 year sort of, I guess, thesis in trying to put that into action. And I put so much heart and so much work and so much, I guess, love into that story that once I'd written it, there was just no giving up on it. It just wasn't it wasn't an outcome for me. So I always knew that if I didn't publish it through a publisher, that I would go ahead and do a self-publish route with feeders. So yeah, it took a ton of perseverance. Definitely had to. I even hired a developmental editor to help me through that book and make sure that um, it was as good as at least I could make it at that time. Um, and now I feel like I've grown beyond that book even, but yeah, it was a really really hard book to get through, to get out there, and to do what I felt like was the best thing I could do as far as the story goes. So, um, you just can't get honestly in writing. You just can't give up. And it's so trite, right? Like everybody says that, and there's rejection and all that, and you hear it, and but the truth, it's the truth. Like you just have to keep pushing forward. You have to keep believing in yourself, which is the hardest thing to do in the world sometimes. So,
Yeah, and there's a certain aspect to it, right? Of you keep getting better. So you speak about being a little naive when you start out. You probably always think that first book, you're just so excited that you finished it, right? You can't fathom it just not being good. Like it needs some development, right? And Patrick Barb, who I know you said you're an acquaintance with, he talks a lot about his writing developing, over a decade plus of experience, especially in writing short fiction. So I think that's really great. And now we have two books from you and a short story collection, which looks really cool too. And I know I'm jumping around a lot here, but I was going to mention the film thing a bit later. But since you mentioned it, what's your involvement currently with this feature film adaptation that's being developed of The Wallpaper Man?
it's a very similar process to a novel, if not even more difficult, but it's a ton of fun too. In that the director reached out and we kind of talked about it for quite a while before we put anything into action, and then we wrote several versions of, I guess, a feature film. But then uh, he decided, and I think he's right in this, that a lot of the films that get made these days have what's called a proof of concept film, and it's a short film, and it's really an ad or a commercial that you can provide to a production company or distributor to help sell I about said manuscript
The
to
manuscript.
help to help sell the full screenplay or the full script. And so every step of the way I've been working with, his name is Amit Gupta, and he runs a company called Falconer Media, and he does a lot of great commercial work. He's got some of the best commercials out there you'll ever see with like motorcycles and cars, and it's just he's fantastic. He's got a real director's eye. But together we worked on this, and ultimately he decided we needed to make the proof of concept. So he and I both worked on, and I did most of the writing, but he had a lot of feedback and uh, wrote the script for that, got that made, flew out to LA to watch that happen, which was again just a dream come true, just surreal to be watching your story come to life in that way. Um, and since then, we've again several more drafts of the full screenplay, and have they have something called I'm trying to remember the exact term, because a lot of the stuff is parallel with novels, but it's almost like a developmental editor type role where you send it out and you get basically a company to review it and provide feedback and critiques. And so we've been through that process too. I forget the exact term. It's that they call it in script writing. But right now, currently, I believe it's just now. It really got delayed by the writer's strike. Um, just couldn't really do much for a good portion of this year, but it's back out there, and hope to have some good news that some people have some interest in it and see where it goes from there. So.
Had you done any screenwriting before that?
No, I hadn't, and luckily enough, Amit was kind enough to allow me to get my feet with that and kind of guide me along. And there's a lot of different software that you have to use. I mean, it's so completely different than writing, novels and manuscripts, and it's so pared down. And it was very difficult for me to sort of shift into the mindset of a script writer. Like for me, it's really, really hard, honestly. I prefer novel writing just because I really like to play with words. But in screenplay writing, it's so much more direct, and it's so much more about action and setting the scene, and so yeah, but a ton of fun as well. So, how about yourself? I know you said you were involved in media as well. So, um, have
Yeah, I
you
don't I don't
noticed
do a
much of a
lot of
difference in that?
screenwriting as much
Okay.
anymore. My brother is a filmmaker, and I actually act in a lot of his
Oh,
short
okay.
films.
Okay.
But I do write a little bit, and my brother Josh, he's actually my twin, looks just like me.
Oh, hey.
He says that I'm way better at prose than I am at screenwriting. I just write really boring screenplays. I mean, the actual text is boring. The content, it's okay. But it's just such a
Gotcha.
different mindset when you go into it because screenwriting's all about space, right? You gotta read it
Yes.
fast. It's got to be snappy. You set the scene, characters talk, and then you move on. There's really not a lot of
Hmm.
space for nuance, right?
That's absolutely true. Yep.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you. That sounds really, really cool. And I think it's even like a pretty privileged position to be able to say like, hey, I was actually impacted by the WA strike too. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
there you go, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good
going
looking.
back into feeders, one thing that struck me is that there's a really strong environmentalist message with it, and I was wondering if that's something that you intended to put into it from the jump, or if that's something that came naturally as you continue to write it.
That one came more organically. Um, it's kind of interesting because when I first started writing, I'm a type A personality, and I would outline everything, act one, act two, act three, every chapter, every scene. And what I've come to find over time is that characters don't exactly do what you want them to do. They sort of tell you who they are, as does the plot and the story. You think the story is going to be about one thing and it shifts. And so as I was writing that book, and sort of in creating this creature, had to think through what the genesis would be and what type of a message I wanted to tell. And so um, the environmentalist piece was sort of organic, as it went. And funny enough, I also work at an energy company, so it's something that is on my mind. It's something that we we do have to pay attention to as the human race, right? Like we are running out of resources over time, and um, natural resources have done actually a lot of good for industry, or I'm sorry, for the country and
Yeah, it's
for
definitely done good for industry.
yeah, industry and the it's done. I mean, we're powered by power, really, as trite as that sounds. And so we do have to shift into green and renewable energy as well. But yeah, you just see the Earth. It's crazy, man. It's like a beautiful, wonderful place, and um, I just hate to see it get destroyed at some point. Humanity does seem to be destructive in that regard at times, but we're also awesome. We're an we're an incredible species, and we've done a lot of good things too. And so, yeah, I don't know, a lot of rambling there, I guess, but
No, that's great, but interestingly enough, I mean, you speak a lot about it seems like you have sort of a hopeful disposition about what the future could look like, but when the monsters start attacking in your story, we come across a lot of very bad people. So
yeah.
maybe talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess the piece there would be that we all wear a mask. We sort of act the way we have to act in society because there are rules. And once society breaks down and there are no more rules, then I think a lot of people would act a lot differently, right? Like when we have to survive and meet our primal needs, I mean, I think all rules and law and all that stuff is off the table. So, but at the same time, humanity is humanity, and I think a lot of people do their best to help and to pull others up. And so maybe the best way to say it is I think like a societal collapse would just amplify someone's true character.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
So,
exactly what happens in the book, right? And I think
mhm.
some of the best disaster plots, they do have some kind of message about either us or the planet. And that's part of why I really enjoyed the story. Um, but I'm not as familiar with your other work. So how's the reception been from that? Because I know you're very humble about this, but it is an award-winning piece, right? So how's the reception for The Girls in the Cabin been?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So after Feeders, I was really burned out on creating, sort of a speculative species or monster and wanted to just write a story about people. And so that's why it's quite a bit different. I'd kind of say it's a psychological thriller. Um, and it turns out that people are just as hard to write as creatures are. So that book was actually, believe it or not, much harder to write than Feeders. It was the most difficult book I've ever written. I wrote it from multiple perspectives. I mean, I rewrote that thing probably like 7 times before I was able to, in my mind, nail all the characters and the voices of all the characters in the story itself too. So um, that one really hurt when it didn't sell because I thought for sure that one was going to sell. And when Jaffe picked it up, Jaffe's I think they're the largest independent publisher in the UK now. Um, I just felt really honored because they're just such a great publisher and they've done such a good job with distributing the book and getting it out there and with the marketing. And, um, the sales have been beyond my expectations. I don't know the exact figures, but I think we're getting somewhere close to 10,000, total units sold at this point. So,
Wow,
uh,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. No, it's been huge, and I did enter it in some contests, and it was named the best psychological thriller for the Best Thrillers Book Awards, which was really cool. And um, to be honest, it's just fun to be able to interact with readers and to have your work spread and to be able to talk about your books with people is such a blessing. It's all I've ever really wanted to do. So yeah, that book, beyond any book, has exceeded my expectations. I had no expectations for it, honestly, and so. Yeah, super pleased with how it's been received so far.
Yeah, so I need to tell everybody the conversation that you and I had because I felt like I would have to pry this out of you on this this discussion here, but I congratulated you for winning that award, right? And you're like, I entered into some contest and I just won, but I think what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of people enter a lot of books into these competitions. I'm talking
Mm.
thousands, and your title won, so hats off to you. That's
Well,
actually a
thank
really great
you.
accomplishment.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's kind of funny because we took a total tangent here, but people talk about, hey, you can't write for money and all that stuff, right? Like you just have to love it and you can't write for awards and the recognition's nice, but the only reason I write for money or would want to write for money is so I could write full time.
Right.
That's the only reason, right? Like I just enjoy writing so much that if the recognition comes along and the money comes with it, then that's just an added bonus. But yeah, I really appreciate that, and yeah, I'll admit, definitely recognition is nice. So thank you
So
for.
you mean you're not passionate about your job as a CPA?
uh, well, it actually it's done so much for me. It's funny, right? Because like everything in life sort of creates opportunities elsewhere at times, right? And so like as a CPA and I said I'm a type A person, I'm good at the job. It is something that I do enjoy and has been very rewarding as far as um me being able to provide for my family, those types of things. It's been great. It's provided a lot of opportunity, but yeah, is it my number one passion in life? No. So
That's
definitely, but
awesome. Yeah, some of the best advice I got when I was just starting out my professional career is make your plan A your plan B and your plan B your plan A. Basically, make money now so you can fund your passion in the future, right? And I see a
Yes.
lot of writers when they start out, they just want to write. And so they want to figure out a way to keep writing and they focus on sort of low paying jobs because they're focused so much on their
Oh
writing.
yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, you
Yeah.
seem to have done it the opposite way, which is great. It sets you up in an awesome position to, be able to fuel your passion in that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers have that dream of just writing 100% of the time, but I think maybe like less than 1% of writers can do that. I mean, it's something that is extremely difficult to do. And again, you need to just have such a passion for writing and love for writing that
Mm.
you do that no matter what. And it's just a part of your life, right? Like um I'll write no matter what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
uh
So
you don't
let's
have, I
talk
guess what I'm
about
saying is you don't have to have either
yeah.
or. And a lot of writers are like, you have to have one or the other. So
Right. So let's talk a little bit about how you balance that then, because having three kids, you said, right?
yeah.
Three kids, having a full-time job, and then having this writing career that's taken off right now. If if you were to sit down and go like, okay, I'm writing another novel right now, what does your routine look like?
Yeah. So I found my passion a little bit later in life, and so I've had to accommodate that by getting up early. I mean, really, I'm out of bed by around 5 in the morning most mornings, and so I'll write before work, and
Yeah,
I'll get a
early
couple
risers
hours.
unite. I respect it.
You have to do it. I would sleep later if I could, but it's the only time that's mine. The rest of the time is taken up, and then if I have time at work at lunch, I'll spend some time at work during my lunch hour writing a little bit. Um, and then the weekends when I can, but it's being consistent and I have this motto, it's 500 words a day. Because if you write 500 words a day, you can have a first draft in about 6 months. Now, do I usually hit that? Not always, but it's a very achievable goal. It's not too difficult to hit. So that's something that I focus on and consistency and uh, just not being away from the page for too long.
Awesome, awesome. And that still gives you some time to obviously spend time with your family, right? And
Yep.
not
Hmm.
get yourself in a position at work where you're potentially losing your job because you're spending too much time on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, can't do that. No, it's a very demanding job, so definitely have to focus when I'm there.
That's awesome. So I want to get a little nerdy when it comes to multimedia rights real quick because you're in a position now where you're sort of bouncing between publishing and film, right? So is there any
Mhm.
insight you can give into how like those multimedia rights sort of transfer or what's involved with that?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question, but I would say that as far as like books go, I try to retain. I'm now trying to retain film rights, so I don't give those away
Nice.
because I think for the most part, a lot of the producers are going to come to you directly. Um, I don't know how much value a publisher adds there. Now, I'm not saying that's not the case and that they don't have contacts with film agents and that type of thing, but um, from my experience at least, right? And in talking to the producer or the director of my short film, that's something that he thinks writers should try to retain if they can. Uh, whereas like with Audible rights, I don't have an ability to go sell that to audio companies very well. So I'm happy to give those away. Foreign rights, they're going to be better at that. I think obviously the book rights, if you can retain, so some publishers, like I'm under contract, feeders will be revert to me within 2 years. So I'll get those rights back within 2 years. If you can get your rights back at some point, that's a fantastic thing. Now, there's other publishers where you can't do that and they buy lifetime rights. But if they buy lifetime rights, you just hope that they're really invested in the book and that they're, making it worth your while and helping distribute the book that way. And then vice versa on the film side, you really want to make sure you understand agreements. And I do have some of that background. So you really want to take the time to read through all the agreements,
It does pay
understand.
to be a CPA, right?
It does in some ways, yeah. So you really want to understand what you're giving away before you do that. You want to retain if you want to retain future. You basically don't want to give away the whole what's the right word? The whole concept, like you don't want to give away the rights to the creature or the story itself. You want to be able to retain publishing rights on your own, those types of things. So yeah, and every contract's different. So it does come down to spending time going through the contracts, understanding, and when you don't understanding, potentially even engaging an attorney or somebody to help you.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's every writer's dream to have their work adapted into a film in some way, right? So,
Mhm.
you having the purview to go like, yeah, I want to maintain or retain all of the film rights. That's pretty awesome because I'm not sure anybody would actually think to do that when they're scanning through a contract. So that's great.
Well, the other thing you have to realize too, and I think a lot of writers do, but maybe a lot of the newer ones don't, is that especially when you go with like a traditional publisher, and I'll just ask you, do you know what the average royalty is that writers retain?
Oh, you're
Take a
asking
guess.
me. Oh
Yeah, take a
gosh.
guess.
Below 10%
You
for
got,
trad
you're
pub.
right. You're one of the first people who've actually answered. It's about 8%.
Yep.
So if you're giving away or you're selling audio rights or you're selling film rights or whatever, you just have to remember you're selling a large percentage of your future income stream, right? That
Yep.
potentially could get you closer to your dream of writing full time or creating full time.
That's right. Awesome. Hey, good to know. Um, okay, so what are some big takeaways you have from your experience in 2023, especially having these two works published, and how are you going to take that into your next publications moving forward?
Yeah, no, it's another great question. And I think I'll just sort of circle back to what we talked about earlier, and it's just perseverance. If something is important to you, doesn't matter if it's writing, could be anything, anything really. It's like you just have to believe in yourself. And it takes work, right? Like nothing in this life typically is ever easy. It's the folks who put in the time and grind who typically see the fruits of their labor. Um, and it doesn't really feel like a grind if it's something you love. So that's what I would say. And I'm continuing to just, for the most part, treat my writing as I have always treated it, which is a priority. And doing the 500 words in the morning, just staying consistent with it, continuing to try to focus on that more than marketing and the social media presence and all that, which can still a hefty amount of time, which I found too. So marketing is another beast that it's very involved, but something that's necessary so you can't lose track of writing in that regard. And then in 2024, I don't know if I'll have any novels come out. I do have a novella on submission right now. I do have a short story that's going to be coming out in an anthology this year. When I say this year, I mean 2024. I am working on a new novel, and it's going to be more in the thriller realm. I'll always be slipping in a little bit of horror because I do
Mhm.
love horror. But it's going to be more focused on, I guess you could say, some estranged sisters this time, and their relationship. But yeah, I won't say much more than that. But yeah, that's what I'm working on and hope to have hopefully that book out in 2025.
All right. Well, hey, keeping with the theme, I love it. Estranged relationships, very good.
Yep.
Do you have any interest in writing something that's not as dark in the future, or are we sticking with horror and thrillers?
I have, funny enough that you should ask. After I finished Girls in the Cabin, I did write a third novel, and it's almost young adult. Um, and it's got a lot of humor in it, and I just loved writing this book. Um, it'd be hard to describe, I guess, outside of the fact that it's just a kid who is a 17-year-old who's perpetually 17 years old stuck in hell in his attempt to escape. And so that one's much lighter and a lot more fun. And I actually did send that around to some agents. I thought I might try the agent route again and some publishers, and I've gotten zero yeses with that one. So
It's tough right now. It's a tough
yeah.
industry. A lot of publishers aren't taking a lot of stuff right now. So
So that one is the answer is yes, and I loved it, and it was a lot of fun. And what I think I might do with that one is self-publish it, but I think I need to write the sequel first. With
ah,
self-publishing, that's what you want to do is have read through. So you want to have several books ready to go. And that'd just take the time. And so in the meantime, though, I'm sticking with thrillers. I think that's where I'll put most of my focus. But yes, I'd love to do the lighter series too.
nice, nice. Okay. So we have about 2 minutes left here. I want to hear what you're currently reading, if anything, and what you've been watching.
I appreciate that. So Ronald Malfi, I've just gotten into him. I don't know if you've read him, but he has a book called Come With Me, which was tremendous. I'm trying to read as much independent horror as I can. So Sammy Scott and Beta, I've got that book ready to go. And I don't know if I'm going to say his name right, but Andrew Najberg, he just wrote an island, sort of a trapped island apocalyptic thriller called Golatok, which I'm going to give it a shot. I'm reading I'm a big fan of Mona Awad or Awad. I still don't know how to say her last name, but
Yeah,
reading her new
I
book,
say a wad.
Rouge.
Yeah, I'm familiar
Is it
with it too.
Awad?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just never know. I never know. But Bonnie was tremendous. So yeah, I've a huge to be read list. And then watching, total sidebar, not many people have seen it, but there's a show called, Drops of God on Apple TV, which is just tremendous. And it's all about wine tasting, and it's like that's super involved family dynamic, sort of generational television show, which is just tremendous. It's so if you get a chance, check that one out.
Very interesting. The
Yeah,
horror thriller writer watches a TV show about wine tasting. How about that?
absolutely. I read pretty widely too, so I try to not just focus on all the dark stuff as you said. So
Excellent. Okay. Well, this has been a really fun chat. I'm really glad you're able to join me here, especially on this time between the holidays, which I know can be, it could be relaxing, it could be hectic. You have 3 kids, so I'm just glad you were able to slot this in. I really appreciate it.
well, thanks again for having me, Joey. It was awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I hope we're able to chat again soon and keep writing because I'll definitely check out your other book. But I want to see more stuff from you in the future, and I'm excited to see how the feature film turns out.
Thank you. Thank you for looking into my work. I really appreciate that as well. So
For sure. All right. I'll talk to you soon.